Israeli forces stormed the largest hospital still functioning in Gaza on Thursday, claiming it's being used by Hamas. The director of the facility called the assault catastrophic. Holly Williams reports from Tel Aviv, and we want to warn you, some of the images you are about to see are disturbing.
Israeli special forces stormed Nasser Hospital today, calling the operation precise. Israel claims Hamas held hostages at the hospital complex and says it found grenades and mortar shells during the raid. Hamas denies using hospitals for military purposes. This man says 2 patients were killed in the attack, though we cannot confirm that. Israel's also pressing ahead with plans to launch a ground assault in Rafah, where around 1.5 million Palestinians are sheltering. Israel says it'll allow civilians to leave the battle zone, but the United Nations has warned an offensive could lead to a slaughter. Mohammed and Alia El Basyouni stayed in Gaza City during 4 months of bombardment, despite an Israeli order to evacuate. They stayed put, they told us, because they were too elderly to leave on foot like thousands of others. Their son Loe is a US citizen who lives in Los Angeles and helped design a robotic helicopter for NASA used on Mars.
My dad had heart condition, there was nobody to help him. He couldn't breathe. My mom thought he was dying.
He was finally able to get them out of Gaza last week, though on the first attempt, they say, their convoy of ambulances came under fire.
Were there many times when your mum and dad thought they wouldn't survive?
Every minute.
Israel says it apprehended dozens of suspects in the hospital area, John, and it accuses some of them of taking part in the October 7th attack.
Holly Williams in Tel Aviv. Thank you, Holly. Jon Alterman joins me now for more. He is a senior vice president and director of the Middle East program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. John, good to be with you again. President Biden has said some tougher things about Israel recently, saying that the Israeli forces should avoid an all-out assault on Rafah. How do you assess the change in the president's stance, and where do you think things are heading?
I think the president is partly looking at how to have impact with the Israeli leadership, how to have impact with the Israeli public. He's looking at his own public and increasing divisions in the United States over this. He's walking a very difficult line, and it seems to me that what he's doing is partly diplomatic, but it's also partly political, both in terms of the United States, but also in terms of Israel.
That's the outside game. The inside game is being worked by the CIA director, who is in the Middle East. He's in Egypt. Then William Burns headed over to Israel. What do you think is the leverage Burns has? And this is all in the space of trying to get a negotiated settlement to the hostage question.
Well, there's a lot of leverage. The CIA has a lot of information. The CIA has a lot of things that people want. I was Bill Burns' special assistant many years ago. He's a very persuasive man. Whether he is going to be able to move the Israelis, I don't know. The Israelis have never been especially close to him. The other issue is it's always hard to figure out is when Prime Minister Netanyahu says he's not going to make a deal, that's absurd. Is that negotiating? Yeah. Is that about signaling to his own cabinet? Or is that what he really means? There are negotiations going on. He's allowed negotiations to continue. But what he actually means by what he says is something that nobody, I think, has quite a grip on.
Right, and it's probably what Bill Burns is sitting there trying to figure out as he meets with Israeli officials. Let me ask you, the Washington Post reported that the Biden administration and a small group of Middle East partners are rushing to complete some kind of plan for a long-term peace between Israel and Palestinians, including timelines for a Palestinian state. That seems like is that realistic? It seems like a huge ask for such an ugly time. Or is there some way in which the chaos of the moment maybe allows a big strike or a big move like that?
I think they want to be prepared if there's a chance to make this work. The people working on it, I don't think have any illusions that they are the ones who are going to form it all, but they do think, and I've spoken to some of them, they do think that if they have a plan, then when people need a plan, there's something there. Maybe there'll be an opportunity to implement it. The United States came up with the Future of Iraq project that nobody involved actually put a lot of credit into. It didn't end up shaping the future of Iraq, but it's important to plan in case there is an opportunity to implement. You want to have something you can actually put into effect.
John, there was a long time in American history where careful, constant diplomacy was required for any administration in the Middle East. And there were attempts to pivot away from that. Are we back to a situation where any presidency is going to have to tend relentlessly this part of the brief because of what's been going on for the last couple of months?
The Secretary of State George Shultz used to talk about how much of diplomacy was gardening. There's a problem if you don't pay attention to the Middle East, if you assume you have it all under control. You don't have it under control. The interesting thing is the Biden administration, when it came in, said that we have made a mistake. We have used military instruments much too much in the Middle East. We need to use all the tools of statecraft, diplomacy, trade, economic relationships. And yet, when there's a crisis, really the most effective single tool you have is you can move troops really quickly. You can destroy targets you need to destroy quickly. All the diplomacy, it all takes time, and it takes relationships, and that takes time.
Very helpful. Jon Alterman, Senior Vice President and Director of the Middle East Program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Thank you very much, John.